India would not conduct a major military attack on a neighboring country's territory without being 100% sure that it knew what it was doing. India was not interested in this being seen as the opening salvo of a protracted war with Pakistan, that this is not India versus Pakistan, it's certainly not Hindu versus Muslim, it is India united against terrorism.
Two months ago, in a world already engulfed by war, a new conflict burst into the headlines. India and Pakistan, nuclear-armed neighbours, fought a brief, intense battle.
It's the biggest counter-terror offensive launched by India.
पाकिस्तान ने भरपूर जवाबी कार्रवाई की और इस कार्रवाई में भारत को किस किस्म के नुकसानात पहुंचाए गए हैं.
We start tonight with a breaking story that India has launched an attack on Pakistan and Pakistan administered Kashmir and Jammu.
The two countries have gone to war before, but the latest clash marks a dramatic shift in their equation. India says it's drawn a new red line with Pakistan. In this series, a first of its kind on Al Jazeera, I will interview a leading parliamentarian from both sides of the border, Shashi Tharoor from India and Bilawal Bhutto Zardari of Pakistan. With them, I examine what India's new normal, which Pakistan calls a new abnormal, means for both countries. In this episode, my interview with Shashi Tharoor, I ask, does India have the evidence to blame Pakistan for the attack in Kashmir? And can it claim its new red line is a success? You can also find the link to my interview with Bilawal Bhutto in the description box below. Before we get to the Shashi Tharoor interview, a brief chronology of how we got here.
The trigger for the war came in April with the brutal killing of 26 people, mostly tourists, in Indian-administered Kashmir. An act of violence that shocked India. New Delhi accused Islamabad of engineering the attack.
I say to the whole world, India will identify, track and punish every terrorist and their backers.
On the 7th of May, India carried out strikes against what it called terrorist camps inside Pakistan.
India exercised its right to respond and preempt as well as deter more such cross-border attacks. These actions were focused on dismantling the terrorist infrastructure.
Pakistan strongly denied any link to the Kashmir attack, accused India of military aggression and retaliated.
भारत के बेबुनियाद इल्जामात पर इंतहाई तहम्मुल और बर्दाश्त का मुजाहरा किया, लेकिन उसने अपने घमंड में हमारी सरहदों की हुर्मत को पामाल करने की नाकाम कोशिश की.
What unfolded was nearly 4 days of the worst fighting between the two countries in decades. A ceasefire announced by US President Donald Trump came into effect on the 10th of May.
India and Pakistan have pulled back from the brink of war. But where does that leave both countries? For an Indian perspective, I'm joined by Shashi Tharoor. He's a member of Parliament of India's main opposition party. He's a seasoned former UN diplomat, and he's been the face of India's global outreach. Shashi Tharoor, thanks so much for talking to us on Al Jazeera.
Thank you, Vasu.
Now, India has defined a new red line in its relationship with Pakistan and says that every act of terror that India believes originates from Pakistan will be treated as an act of war. But where's the hard evidence of a Pakistani link to the April attack in Kashmir, Mr. Tharoor? India often cites past attacks, but where's the evidence in this specific case?
Well, first of all, the past attacks are not irrelevant because there have been so many of them, and every one of them was denied until Pakistani culpability was then established. I don't think your viewers need too many examples, but the two most famous ones would be the 2008 Mumbai attack, which took place while the Pakistani foreign minister was in Delhi, was of course denied by the Pakistanis until one of the killers was captured alive, and his address, his home, who trained him, where he was trained in Pakistan, all came out. So that denial was turned out to be completely fraudulent.
Okay, but in this instance,
and again, the second example is Osama bin Laden. They didn't know where he was allegedly, and sure enough, he was found in a safe house near an army camp at an army cantonment.
Sure.
So first point is, these past attacks are not irrelevant because Pakistani denials have proven time and time and time again to be worthless, number one.
Yes.
Number two, This attack was prefigured by an absolutely obnoxiously bigoted speech by the general in charge of the Pakistani army, essentially arguing the preposterous theory that Muslims cannot live in a non-Muslim majority country. So we saw that as a signal. Number three, the actual attack bore all the hallmarks of military precision planning, reconnaissance, equipment, action, infiltration and exfiltration.
Yes.
Fourth, our intelligence has been able to identify 4 of the 5 killers. 2 of them are Pakistani nationals whose names and photographs have previously been on file.
Right.
2 others were Kashmiri radicals who had left India to go to Pakistan for training 10 years ago and clearly been brought back for the purpose. So all I'm saying is India would not conduct a major military attack on a neighboring country's territory without being 100% sure that it knew what it was doing.
Okay, so I want to ask you about the past precedents you cited, because as you know, basic principle of jurisprudence is that each case has to be tested on its own merit. And you have taken many of these points of evidence to countries around the world. They have looked at this evidence and none of them have felt that they need to condemn Pakistan or blame Pakistan for the attack. So doesn't that raise a question mark over the evidence?
Well, first of all,
that India claims of a Pakistani link.
It is not true that they have not condemned Pakistan. In private conversations with us, they have certainly been explicit, not only in condemning Pakistan, but in telling Pakistanis whom they met.
But Mr. Tharoor, just respectfully, just as you know, as a former foreign minister, a seasoned former UN diplomat, that what really counts is what is said on the record, not in private conversations. But let me ask you about the military operation, which India subsequently launched and declared a success. What's the basis of that success? Because the war with India has actually ended up giving a real boost to the Pakistani army's image. Many experts say there's been barely any operational damage to the terrorist groups that India says it's targeted.
Haven't you been seeing all these satellite pictures?
Isn't it business as usual when it comes to Pakistan?
First of all, have you seen the satellite pictures? These are not Indian pictures. These are pictures commercially available, released by international sources, of the extensive damage done to 11 Pakistani air bases, gaping craters in the middle of the Chaklala Air Base, Air Marshal Nur Khan Air Base, not far from Army headquarters in Rawalpindi. So, I mean, don't tell me there was no damage in Pakistan. This has all been seen. Commercially available satellite pictures.
This is not me. These are experts. For example,
there isn't any refutation to the visible damage that was done in Pakistan by the devastating Indian strikes of the night of the 9th to 10th of May, which is why on the 10th of May morning, the Pakistani Director General of Military Operations reached out to his Indian counterpart saying, let's call it off.
This is counterterrorism expert Christine Fair at Georgetown University, who said none of the targets that India hit changed the operational capabilities of either Lashkar-e-Toiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed. These are the groups that India has accused of launching multiple strikes.
She's referring to the strikes of 6/7. Yeah.
Yes. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, this is to India's point that the strikes have been effective in acting as a deterrence, says we make this pledge that we will avenge each drop of the blood of these martyrs, referring to the 36 people that Pakistan says civilians who were killed. So where is the evidence that the strikes have worked in acting as a deterrence or have got Pakistan to change its ways?
No, I don't think it's necessary that Pakistan has changed its ways. All Pakistan has been taught in this process is that if you do this again, there will be a price to pay each time. Now, how willing are you to keep on paying the price? So I'm just telling you, damage has been done. Now, I know that buildings can be rebuilt and they will be rebuilt.
Yes.
I know that the Jaish-e-Mohammed building that was struck with great precision in the heart of Bahawalpur will be rebuilt in 6-7 months. But the problem is when Pakistan does it, they are openly saying to the world, we are supporting terrorists, we are facilitating their work. We are showing the world that we are the biggest state sponsor of terrorism on the planet.
Okay, it's interesting that you say that Pakistan remains unchanged because the Prime Minister of India is saying something very different. In a speech that he gave after the ceasefire, Mr. Narendra Modi said that India only agreed to the ceasefire after, and I quote, Pakistan appealed and said it will not indulge in any sort of terror activities or military audacity in the future. Now, that's essentially the Prime Minister saying Pakistan has effectively surrendered. Is that even possible?
Look, my personal view, and honestly, I've not spoken to the Prime Minister about this particular comment of his. All I understood was that from the very beginning of the conflict, India had signaled, and they were doing this publicly in their daily briefings as well, that India was only interested in retribution against the terrorists for their attack on Pahalgam,
Yes.
that it was not interested in this being seen as the opening salvo of a protracted war with Pakistan, that this is not India versus Pakistan, it's certainly not Hindu versus Muslim, it is India united against terrorism.
No, but
and
that
that message, wait a
respectfully
minute,
not my
wait, no.
question. My question is about the Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister has also told me, the quote you have read,
Yes.
you may have got it right. I don't know. I've not heard this.
This is from a
quote.
public speech and from
All right,
the
fair enough.
transcript that is publicly available.
Fair enough. I think the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. If the Pakistanis don't misbehave in future, then we are certainly not going to. We have
but
no
could it-
desire to go to war with Pakistan.
No, but could it also be, Mr. Tharoor, that the Prime Minister might be exaggerating the success of the red line for a domestic audience?
Look, I think you will
And-
have to ask him. As far as I'm concerned,
And so hence my question.
My assumption is that I will judge Pakistan by its own conduct.
Okay.
If Pakistan were to actually conduct no terrorist operation for a period of time, that would be a good sign. But what is more important is, will Pakistan dismantle the existing infrastructure of terrorism? Will it shut down these camps? Will it arrest these criminals?
Okay, which
will
are-
it actually close and freeze their bank accounts? None of which Pakistan is
Okay,
doing.
which Pakistan will of course claim that they are doing or working on. But let me come to this. Let me come to the question of the success.
200-acre campus in the middle of a
Success.
Punjabi city. Where are they working on closing
Okay.
it down?
Outside of whether the strikes are successful or not, has India painted itself into a corner with this red line? Shiv Shankar Menon, a former national security advisor to India, someone you know well, has said, you risk handing control of the remote to the terrorists. They will decide effectively when India and Pakistan go to war.
No, that is precisely an oversimplification of what the Prime Minister has said. As I have understood it, some random guy blows himself up in an Indian cinema theatre or a movie place or a marketplace or whatever.
Yes.
That doesn't necessarily mean we go to war with Pakistan. It is when we see the hallmarks of a terrorist operation that shows signs of either directly originating from Pakistani sources, or which is inescapably, as in the case of Pahalgam, incontrovertibly, in my view, linked to specific institutions on Pakistani territory,
Yes.
then we will react. According to the Government of India Ministry of Home Affairs website,
Yes.
there were 24 terrorist attacks last year from Pakistan sources or Pakistani linked people.
But
in
I come
Kashmir.
back-
But we didn't go to war.
But I come back to my
We didn't go
question.
to war any of them. It's only when you see a big operation clearly planned like this that you would take action.
But I come back to my question because you're saying India will act in a reasoned manner, but
course.
it's not necessarily something that seems to have convinced the world. The global strategic community are saying things like CSIS, a Washington-based think tank on India's red line, terrorists and non-state actors could potentially drag the region into a nuclear crisis. The Royal United Services Institute, London, fringe actors may attempt to provoke confrontation in order to manipulate state responses.
No, of course they would. They would try and do that, and we have the brains to understand when we are being
But
played.
then aren't we fallen
But-
into their trap?
No, I don't think we will. But let me explain one more thing. These people are only in a position to be able to do this because Pakistan enables it, because Pakistan facilitates it, because Pakistan provides its territory, offers sanctuary, permits them to conduct military training, encourages radicalization. There's a whole lot of things happening that are within the control of Pakistan to curb, number one. Number two, please understand that as far as all this is concerned, you are already mentioning the nuclear bogey. Nothing that happened in this last
I am
month-
not. A
Okay, whoever the
Washington
person
DC
you're
based
quoting-
think tank is, yes.
Nothing that happened in the course of Operation Sindoor, this last conflict with Pakistan over 88 hours,
Yes.
came anywhere remotely close to the nuclear threshold. Not only were no nuclear facilities targeted by India, because
Sure.
I know there was an allegation we did not, but equally, the response to sub-conventional attacks, that
Yes.
is, attacks by terrorist groups, from our side can only be conventional because A, we don't have terrorist groups
Okay,
to send
here's
back, and number two,
Yes.
we have already declared a policy of no first use of nuclear weapons. So we will never escalate to the nuclear level.
Here's another potential risk, that now with this ramped up expectation of a red line, that you've ramped up also expectations of 1.4 billion Indians, that every cross-border incident will result in war.
No, not
and look
everyone.
what, and let me finish. Virtually any. And look what happened this time. There was a huge public backlash when the ceasefire was declared.
Yeah, but first of all, on the 24 incidents last year that did not result in war, let me just point out that's our norm.
Okay.
What we are saying is you give us a reason to go to war and we will not hesitate. We have tried everything. In 2008, after Mumbai, 170 people killed, and we went instead to the international community with all the evidence, massive accumulated dossiers, asked Pakistan to be put in the dock. What happened? Not one person has been either prosecuted or punished by Pakistan.
But if I can
So
come
what
to
do
the
we do?
public
So what do
response,
we do?
yes.
We have no choice but to react with force, with what they call kinetic action, number one. Number two, as far as the public reaction is concerned,
Yes.
the public has every right in a democracy to let its views be known. But in a responsible government's calculation, it seems to me it has every right to override the public sentiment.
Okay, so the government is one thing, but if you also look at the statements being made when you take outside of the official briefings, the Prime Minister himself, these are some of the things he's been saying even after the ceasefire. He's been saying Modi's blood is hot, and now it is not blood but hot sindoor that is flowing in Modi's veins. India's military operation is called Operation Sindoor, hence Sindoor. He's saying things like Pakistan should focus on bread and butter issues, if not Modi's bullets are always here.
But look, I mean, the point
That's
is very
inflammatory
clear.
stuff.
Pakistan should focus on bread and butter issues just as we are. We are focused on our development, on our growth, on our economic progress, on investment, on
No, but
trade.
isn't this inflammatory
It's
rhetoric?
Pakistan's terrorists.
No, but Mr. Tharoor, like you said, the government itself was calibrating its response. But when you have this kind of highly incendiary rhetoric from a head of state, does that help matters? Both in terms of relationship with Pakistan, but also in terms of whipping up public sentiment
If
at
you can
home.
understand the difference between a political speech full of imagery and rhetoric and a concrete, sober, measured, reasoned decision by a government, I think you know the answer to your question already.
But this is the Prime Minister. Okay, my last quick question on this before I move on. Do you think this kind of language could have been avoided by Mr. Modi?
Look, when did any politician get away with advising another politician what to say to his audience?
All the time, all the time, all the time. You're not giving me a direct answer, but moving on. India didn't respond just with military action, Mr. Tharoor, but also suspended a crucial water sharing agreement with Pakistan, the Indus Water Treaty. The World Bank, which is the original signatory to the treaty, has said in a statement there is no provision in the treaty to allow for suspension. So potentially, India could have taken an illegal act. Moreover, isn't threatening to cut off water to a whole population, Mr. Tharoor, collective punishment?
First of all, India concluded that treaty 65 years ago, in a spirit, as the preamble of the treaty says, of goodwill and friendship. That spirit has been violated only by the country that has been dispatching terrorists across the border to us. The goodwill and friendship on which the entire treaty is premised has essentially been violated by one party. That's first point. Second point, for the last 2 years,
Yes.
India has been writing to Pakistan pointing out 3 or 4 essential reasons for renegotiation. One is demographic change. Second, there's been significant climate change. The Himalayan glaciers are melting. Third, you've had engineering changes in dam technology which are not foreseen in the terms of the 1960
Mr.
treaty.
Tharoor,
Wait
if
a
I
minute.
may, yes.
Can I,
Yes,
please
yes.
let me finish.
Okay.
Now, having said all of this,
Yes.
the Pakistan for 2 years did not bother to reply to these requests. There was no desire to renegotiate on their part, which is why
Yes.
when the terrorist outrage occurred, the Indian government took a very reasoned position that on the one hand, there is no goodwill and friendship. On the other hand, there is no response to a perfectly reasonable technical request for a technical
Okay,
professional conversation.
If I now may, but that is at the end of the day, Mr. Tharoor, India's position. The
Yeah,
treaty
yeah.
itself, as
Whose
I mentioned.
position do you want me to advocate?
No, hold on. I'm saying that this is a treaty between two countries. India can have its subjective view on what Pakistan is doing wrong. But the treaty, as I mentioned, itself, the World Bank is saying this, does not have any provision to suspend it unilaterally, and hence India is in violation, potentially, of international law. Number one.
The World Bank has not said India is in violation.
No, I'm saying that's the
World
interpretation.
Bank has merely said that there is absolutely no provision.
No provision, yes.
Which
But I want to come
is
on.
an oversight in the drafting, I'll accept that. But the fact is, India was the one that initiated
Okay,
this.
but
Can
on
I
the-
just tell you, the World Bank didn't initiate the discussion. We did it. We concluded a treaty that gives Pakistan 80% of the waters.
Okay, but
it's the most generous treaty in the history of the world.
But let me press you on the collective punishment point, because India could accuse the terrorists coming in and killing Indians. But by cutting off water, and already, by the way, news reports are saying, Mr. Tharoor, that water levels in Pakistan's Chenab River have dropped over 60% after India has been closing sluice gates of upstream dams. Isn't this, and I come back to my initial question, collective punishment of the Pakistani people?
First of all, India has not been closing gates. What India has been doing is flushing out the siltation from
I was
dams
simplifying,
which are already
yes.
existing under the treaty. So that's number one. Number two, you're talking about diverting water and denying people water. The fact is there are climatic factors that also come in, for God's sake. You have a heat wave, you have global warming taking place. For God's sake, talk. You, for 2 years, refused to talk about any of this.
But on collective punishment, though, at the
This is
end
not
of the day,
collective punishment. This is routine flushing out of siltation near a dam. This is nothing, not a new hostile action.
okay, but the intent of suspending the Pakistan would argue this is very much a consequence of a post Pahalgam
Very
response.
good. Maybe it'll dissuade future Pahalgams then. Very good.
But at the end of the day, the idea of suspending the treaty, whether you say it's taken effect or not, doesn't that amount to punishing a whole people?
Look, if everybody in the Pakistani state apparatus is complicit in allowing these terrorists to come and kill us with impunity, we will look for every conceivable
But that's the
means
state,
available.
not the people. This affects people, ordinary Pakistanis.
Sorry, the state, when the Indian state takes an action and the Pakistanis kill our civilians, they kill nuns in the convent of the Carmelites of Mother Mary in Poonch district. They kill worshippers in a Sikh Gurudwara. So what are you going to say? Pakistan is allowed to kill Indian civilians, but Indians can't deny water to
one would say
Pakistani
two wrongs don't make a right.
I agree. So we're not talking about wrongs. We're saying to Pakistan, don't create the first wrong.
Okay,
There'll be no problem. The second wrong won't happen.
Let me look ahead now as we wrap to a long-term vision for peace with Pakistan. India will say that Pakistan has to end terrorism. But all previous peace initiatives between both countries, as you know, have involved trying to solve the Kashmir question. And for the sake of our international audience, Kashmir has remained an intractable dispute for years, and I'm simplifying here, that in simple terms, both sides, India and Pakistan, control one part of Kashmir, but claim all of it. Now, for the purpose of this conversation, you could either restate the fixed position on Kashmir, or is there a more realistic long-term view, Mr. Tharoor, which actually will break this impasse? Look, which other governments in the past have explored?
We've been trying everything, right? So we had Sheikh Abdullah sent as the Indian envoy to Pakistan in the early 60s, nearly came up with a deal, that collapsed. We had the famous back channel between General Musharraf and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. There was a period between 2003 and 2008 when the two countries came very close to a deal. The Pakistani foreign minister at the time, Kasuri, has written a memoir laying out these elements. That too collapsed, and it's always collapsing because of Pakistan's reluctance or unwillingness to come to a compromise. India is tired of being the reasonable player in all of this. And right now we've taken the position we will not talk to people who are pointing a gun at our heads. So first, Pakistan, dismantle the infrastructure of terrorism, shut down these camps, arrest these terrorist criminals, freeze their bank accounts, stop their arms training, deny them flows of arms. Then, when we see your good faith, we can talk about anything. But right now, we are not going to talk to people who are pointing a gun at their heads.
But I'm saying at some point when talks resume, you spoke of some of these earlier initiatives, and most of them centered around the idea that ultimately the two Kashmirs, which are divided by a ceasefire line, that line becomes an international border. No side will really get, even though they may want to, the other Kashmir. Do you think that down the line, as and when there is a climate for peace, that is the most feasible solution?
It could well be, Vasu. Obviously, if I'm going to be in any shape or form under any government, part of a negotiating process, I wouldn't give away the end game at the beginning of the negotiation.
Sure.
So all I'm saying is it's certainly something that could be on the table, but only after terrorism is off the table. So you stop the terrorism, we'll talk, and we'll talk about whatever needs to be talked about.
Okay.
Let me stress one more thing. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, said that the relations with India and Pakistan will one day be like those between the US and Canada. Soft border, people going back and forth, living in each other's countries, working in each other's countries. That US-Canada dream has been destroyed only by one party, by the Pakistanis.
The Pakistanis...
So I'm just saying to you, if Pakistan has chosen to attempt to seize Indian territory by the dispatch of terrorists, they have been taught time and time again that this will not work.
The
Operation
Pakistanis...
Sindoor is the final message that it's never going to work because every time you try this, we're going to hit you hard.
So through this interview, you've been saying Pakistan is this fountain of terror, The Pakistan, as you know, are saying that we've been working to fix it. We've come off a anti-terror financing grey list. We're on a UN Security Council panel which looks at terrorism. So we are not all that India says we are. That there is an attempt to course correct.
I've heard the young Bilawal Bhutto saying that I lost my mother to terrorists, and I do mourn with him. I felt very, very sorry when that news happened. But let me stress, Hillary Clinton put it best. You cannot nurture a nest of vipers in your backyard and expect it to bite only your neighbours.
But they're saying we're fixing that. We're fixing that through the FATF grey list. We've come off the grey list.
If you are
getting
fixing it,
a
why
position
are
on the
these
UN
terrorist
Security Council
organizations still running bases in Pakistan?
All right.
It's as simple as that. You cannot just fix those terrorists who are attacking you and nurture the terrorists who are attacking India or attacking Afghanistan. That's the game the Pakistanis have played for too long.
Well, I was trying to see if there's some way that at least for the moment if the impasse could be broken. But it looks quite challenging. It looks bleak, but we'll have to leave it there.
The onus is on Pakistan. They can make peace, we'll talk.
Shashi Tharoor, thank you for talking to me.